Yo, yo, yo. What is good, y'all? What is poppin'? Welcome to another episode of With the Homies Review, Gaming Edition. This episode, we review Kojima Productions' Death Stranding for the PS4. It has been a long time coming. Years since this game was announced. Donald Trump became president. The Amazon rainforest burned to the ground. The Chicago Cubs won a World Series and the Cleveland Cavaliers won an NBA championship. 28-3 happened in the Super Bowl. We all seen it. Even Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. What? He committed suicide? Really? Dude, I felt like it was all pretty obvious. Whatever. People have been hoping, praying, burning candles, sacrificing baby animals to the almighty Kojima for this very moment. The hype and anticipation that has been built from Kojima himself and the media is unprecedented. We have never seen a game marketed to this extent in the modern era. Maybe only E.T. for the Atari 2600. And we all know how that worked out. Let's see if it lives up to the hype. In the near future, mysterious explosions have rocked the planet, setting off a series of supernatural events known as the Death Stranding. With spectral creatures plaguing the landscape and the planet on the verge of a mass extinction, it is up to the main character, Sam, to journey across the ravaged wasteland and save mankind from impending annihilation. A very vague synopsis. And without spoiling anything for you diehards out there that have yet to dive in, it goes deeper than that. Trust me. Throughout my playthrough, there were many things I enjoyed about the game, but there was also a hell of a lot that I didn't. In terms of storytelling, it definitely has its peaks and valleys. At times the story can be a bit of a jumbled mess of convoluted ideas that feel as though they weren't fully fleshed out, and in others it feels poetic, deep, and beautifully symbolic to the themes that are being discussed. The very simple core themes of the game shine brightest during the rather mundane parts, like finding a ladder through likes, or getting a heartwarming letter from an NPC, all makes you feel the connection that humanity needs so desperately. At times it feels like I'm playing through a game made by Haruki Murakami, or Kobo Abe, who, oddly enough, wrote the opening quote of this game. And then sometimes it feels like I'm playing a game written by a first-year college student, or someone trying to translate a piece of Russian contemporary literature into a video game. I played the game on the normal difficulty, because I didn't want to take 6 weeks to beat it and get this review out to you guys. So I thought that would be the most appropriate. But after playing it, I almost feel like this game should be played on the easiest difficulty, just so you can make the story and cutscenes what I believe to be the highlight of the game, the focus of your gameplay experience. Now in terms of graphics, graphical prowess has always been a moniker of Kojima's. I could still remember playing the Metal Gear Solid games as the game came out, and each one I had felt set benchmarks in terms of the current generation and graphical output. And the same can be said for his first solo piece since his departure from Konami. Graphically, Death Stranding is stunning, and at moments can be jaw-dropping. It's almost like you're watching a movie in 4K HDR, rather than playing a video game. From seeing actual goose pimples along Norman Reedus' arms and face, lifelike lighting textures and shadows that help to bolster the atmosphere, to dark rolling hills spewing with wet mist as you traverse the world making deliveries. It all culminates into a beautiful achievement in graphical fidelity. Now, for gameplay. When it comes to controls, I didn't like them from the jump. It makes very basic things that have been possible in video games for over a decade tedious and borderline annoying. For instance, crossing a river After Grand Theft Auto Vice City, you should be able to cross any body of water with relative ease. And in any other game, something as mundane as that, or even just walking down a hill, would take no degree of difficulty at all. But in Death Stranding, for some reason, it becomes a major focus of the controls. Just moving around at times, a very basic function, can be an unenjoyable experience due to the various balancing engines that have been implemented. It just feels when this game was being developed, Kojima was being an extreme version of himself. I'm surprised you don't have to go through a set of minigames or mash an assortment of buttons repeatedly just to lift your arm to eat something. For a large amount of the game, you're running through wide open hills, valleys, over streams and rivers, sometimes through a city or town, which all sounds great, but the game can feel very empty and lifeless, which to a certain extent I feel is intended, but doesn't make for a deep world off the bat. Only after several hours, and I mean hours, does the game open up and implement fighting mechanics and enemies to battle with. In some other reviews, I heard this game being described as FedEx Simulator, which is definitely funny because at times it feels appropriate. The large majority of the game, you're running around by yourself in this vast world and encounter no one and nothing, just delivering things from point A to point B and communicating with holograms. It's almost like being stuck in a cycle of the worst aspects of some open world games, fetch quests, which is what Kojima decided to make the focal point of Death Stranding's gameplay experience. But over a long time, and I mean a long time, it does grow to feel more like an adventure game than just delivering packages. Now for some quick pros and cons. As for pros, there are some small nods that make this game have a somewhat Metal Gear-like feel, like the codec, the scanner, the slight stealth-based tactical movements, which I all rather much enjoyed. There's some cool gameplay elements like rocking your controller back and forth to soothe your BB. There's a sharing feature that makes traversing the landscape much easier through likes, and it points out the destination with the most likes for you to follow. And funny enough, your urine will actually repel the monsters. All those Monster Energy drinks, right? Now for the cons. I know this might seem dumb, but there's a lot of product placement for Monster Energy drinks. This is a post-apocalyptic future that we're playing through here, and after evading the BT monsters, you get to chug down a can of Monster. It just really ruins the immersion. For such an expansive and lengthy game, it is very boring. The core gameplay elements are monotonous and mundane. The best parts being when you run into a BT, or when there's a cutscene, or even when you get ran up on by a mule and you have to battle a bunch of guys. But the amount of nothingness in between those moments can sometimes leave much to be desired. Look, I've been a huge fan of Kojima since I was a child and first laid eyes on Metal Gear Solid. I've played and loved his other games outside of the Metal Gear franchise, like Police Knots and Snatcher, and I remain a huge fan of his to this day. But over the years, I've noticed a growing trend, where he has grown to become considered a Beethoven or a Michelangelo-like genius. And while I think he's a genius in his own regard, and this is no fault of his own, but I feel due to his overwhelmingly toxic fanbase, his true impact is a little overblown. I also think he's aware of the moniker that his name holds, and he attempts things in video games that would otherwise be terrible ideas, and he's heralded for it. When if another no-name director or writer came along and attempted the same things, they would be bastardized for it. At this point, I feel like Kojima could literally take a steaming hot dump on a paper plate, and his adoring fanbase would call it a masterpiece, comparing it to the likes of Mozart's Requiem. At times, when playing Death Stranding, it feels more like Kojima's attempt at making a completely interactive movie. And if that's what he was really going for, then it's definitely a phenomenal feat. But if you're in the market for a masterpiece of groundbreaking gameplay ingenuity, with a new and refreshing, tightly knit story, then you should seriously look elsewhere. While it's a good game, I believe that what makes a great game is a strong focus on unique and immersive gameplay elements, and that they should be the main focus of development. That a story serves as a complementary piece, that if done really well, can enhance the ultimate gameplay experience. And to be quite frank, The gameplay experience is probably the worst aspect of this game. Death Stranding living up to be a masterpiece is out of the question. Look, at the end of the day, this is Kojima we're talking about. This could all be a Metal Gear Solid 2 level of trolling on his part. He could come out and reveal that the whole game turns out to be a dream or something, and that the whole thing is an infant's manifestation of thoughts and ideas into a world. Something like that might even make for a better art piece, as opposed to what it really is, an extremely boring delivery simulator with trigger philosophies and ideologies that kind of just are grasping at straws. No, but in all honesty, I feel like this is a good first solo piece for Kojima. To be away from Konami, do his own thing. I think it's a good foundation for the rest of his projects going forward. This is your homie Potter, and this has been another episode of With the Homies Review, Gaming Edition. And I'm giving Kojima's Death Stranding 7 screaming bridge babies out of 10.